It is the shocking tale of Ilse, a cruel and sadistic warden who terrorized her prisoners with unspeakable acts of depravity. But when fate finally caught up with her, it was a brutal end that left even the most hardened criminals reeling in horror. If you're brave enough to hear the full story, watch on. But be warned, this is not for the faint-hearted. In the early morning hours of October 8, 1978, inmates at the Women's Correctional Institution in West Virginia discovered the body of Warden Ilse in her office. She had been brutally murdered, and her body was covered in blood. The official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. There were no witnesses to the murder, and no suspects were ever identified. However, there were many inmates who had motives to kill Ilse. She was a cruel and sadistic warden who enjoyed tormenting her charges. She was known to beat and rape inmates, and many of them hated her with a passion. The investigation into Ilse's murder was never able to identify a culprit, and the case remains unsolved to this day. Ilse was a perverted warden who was responsible for the brutal death of a prisoner. She was known for her cruelty and sadism, and she enjoyed torturing and mistreating prisoners. One day she went too far and killed a prisoner in a particularly brutal way. When the other prisoners found out, they revolted against her. They beat her to death and then hung her body from the rafters of the prison. The investigation into the death of Warden Ilse was a long and difficult one. There were many twists and turns, and it took months to finally piece together what happened. The initial autopsy report showed that Warden Ilse had died from blunt force trauma to the head. However, there were no obvious signs of struggle and no weapon was found at the scene. Investigators began to suspect that someone had murderously beaten Warden Ilse with their bare hands. Witnesses came forward and said that they had seen a large man leaving the warden's office shortly before her body was discovered. Surveillance footage from the prison confirmed this, and investigators soon identified the man as an inmate named Hans Gruber. Gruber had been in prison for several years on charges of child molestation. He was well known to be a volatile and dangerous individual. When interrogated, Gruber denied any involvement in the warden's death. However, investigators found blood-stained clothing hidden in his cell, which matched DNA evidence found at the crime scene. Gruber was ultimately charged with murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case against him was airtight, and there was no doubt in anyone's mind that he was guilty of brutally murdering Warden Ilse. Ilse was found brutally murdered in her home, and the investigation revealed that she had been tortured before being killed. Her husband, who was also a prison warden, is the prime suspect in her murder. Did anyone else know about what was happening? No. As far as anyone knows, Ilse was the only one who was aware of the abuse that was happening at the prison. The other prisoners may have had their suspicions, but they had no concrete evidence. There are a few things that could have been done to prevent the death of Warden Ilse. For one, the prison could have had better security measures in place. If the prison had CCTV cameras and guards on patrol, it's likely that the perpetrator would have been caught before they had a chance to kill Ilse. Additionally, if Ilse had not been left alone in her office, it's possible that her attacker would not have had the opportunity to kill her. The brutal death of Warden Ilse brought a shocking end to her cruel and oppressive rule. Her actions had tragic consequences for the prisoners and ultimately led to her own downfall. Her twisted reign will be remembered as one of the darkest episodes in prison history. It is now up to us to take lessons from this story and make sure that such grotesque acts of injustice never happen again. Thank you for watching the video till the end. If you found this content informative and thought-provoking, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel for more chilling stories from history.